Well, hello again. This is Steve, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Good Samaritan story, even though I'm not going to read it verbatim, just what I remember from it. Basically, what this can teach us about being decent people and being good neighbors. Now, the Good Samaritan, I would say, the story fundamentally revolves around this idea that he was able to lower himself to this wretched man who was in need and not bow down to what he might believe otherwise in terms of caste, creed, religion, and so on. He just saw a man in need. And I think this is a story of being a good neighbor and living in reality in a way, right? Because the Good Samaritan, I would say, he believed in reality. I mean, remember, I've mentioned this before, one of my most famous quotes of all time comes from this guy, Guru Nanak, who was the guy who ostensibly anyways, founded Sikhism as modern Sikhism, the religion. One of his famous sayings was, "There is no Muslim, there is no Hindu." And a lot of people might ask, what does he actually mean by that? Well, I take it to mean these are just creations of, these are concocted ideas by man. And he would probably say there's no Sikhism either. Sikhs would be outraged by that, probably. But, I mean, it's like any religion, right? The first guy who comes up with it, he's basically a rebel against all the other religions. And then later on, a bunch of other gurus come along and codify it, which is, you see that in Sikhism. They had a whole series of gurus till by the end, they all had to wear turbans and stuff like that. And Guru Nanak would have never enforced that kind of thing. So he's saying, he's living in a war zone. Guru Nanak was at the time. I'm off from the, I'm away from the Good Samaritan already, but we'll come back to it. He's living in a war zone where, the Muslims are basically trying to pile a stack of Hindu skulls to the moon, basically. And he's basically saying, you guys, what you're believing in is your own bloody creation. It's nonsense. And if he was to finish the statement, probably there's only man, right? Because that's what's nature. That's what's the creation of God is man. So the Good Samaritan, he's walking along, and unlike the holy men who were walking along, that's a who knows what. That's not one of us. That's an untouchable and so on. That's a lowly person. I've got a very, very important sermon to give. I better get going and do my thing. Whereas the Good Samaritan, he says to himself, that's a man in need, right? And I don't know the circumstances of why that guy is in need necessarily. It's just a guy in need, right? That's a man in need. That's a man like I am, walking along, two legs, a head, and with eyes and dreams and wishes and desires and so on, who needs help. I'm going to lend my hand if I can help him out. That's a decent human being. That's a decent neighbor. And the thing is that what clouds people, I think the story behind this is what clouds the holy men and so on from being able to help is the fakery that he believes in. Like he's got this religion that he believes in that says that person, he can work on the Sabbath and we can hire him to do this and that and so on. He's kind of like the untouchable, right? He's what do they call him? He's a Gentile man, right? And therefore, I don't have to help him because my rules only apply to my group, the people who are there. But the Good Samaritan says, no, there's an overriding rule. The overriding rule is that's a man, and what applies to me applies to him. If I desire to be helped when I'm in need, then maybe he does, right? So that's the real man, because he believes in the Good Samaritan sees reality. And he's seeing reality. He's seeing a man in need, whereas the holy man is seeing a concoction of his own sort of fantasy, which is his religion. And he says, my religion says this and that and this and that, and he's going to see things through that. Just like the Hindus and the Muslims at the time of Guru Nanak. The Muslims were seeing the world through, what a beautiful stack of Hindu skulls. And the Hindus are saying, well, we're Hindus and we got to defend ourselves against these people. Whereas if we just all saw ourselves as man, right, wanting to live out our lives in peace and harmony, maybe we just forget about all this nonsense that we've concocted and get along and live together. And maybe because of that arose this religion of of Sikhism, which is probably a better version of both of them. It's sort of a blend of the Muslim and the Hindu religion, but it's a better version of both. But still got codified into a religion, which now they're going to deny that that Sikhism is a religion. Because if Guru Nanak had his way and he woke up and he came walking down the streets again later and he saw a bunch of people fighting in a Gurudwara over whether you should sit down or stand up or whatever, he'd say there's no such thing as Sikhism, even though the Sikhs go around saying that he's the founder of Sikhism. It's really interesting how human beings, we get caught up. We descend into hell, right? We create our own fantasies, which are below us. We descend into them. We say that that's true. And then we end up with things like walking past a Good Samaritan because I'm a holy man with robes in holy orders and I got to get to my very, very important sermon. And that's more important than helping a guy out who's in the ditch who needs help. So not being a very good neighbor in the process. So yeah, so that's my message from it. I think it's pretty obvious. Most people come to a similar conclusion, but it's an interesting story, I think, which there are many stories in old scriptures and old books and so on. And hope to be able to comment on more of them. I'm reading a book by Walt Whitman right now about Walt Whitman, and he had a lot of good things to say too. There's lots of people who had good things to say. Don't have to go back as far as the Bible or whatever text, but nevertheless, Good Samaritan, good neighbor, decent person. I think there's a lot we can learn from there. Steve here again, great chatting, and I look forward to doing this again soon. Talk again later. Bye.